Hare Krishna. Fundamentals of Bhagavad-gita, Chapter 2, Contents of the Gita summarized. Now we'll look at part B, which is the remaining part of the second chapter of Bhagavad-gita. The second chapter of Bhagavad-gita has summarized all the essential teachings of the entire Bhagavad-gita. Therefore, it's a long chapter. Here we begin from text 39 all the way up to text 72. 39 to 41 constitutes a section. Krishna begins to explain the features of devotional service. Let's have a look. Krishna says, till now I have described knowledge of the soul as being different from the body. Krishna had also spoken about knowledge of himself as being permanently different from the living entities. So he has described the spiritual knowledge through analytical study. Now he will explain it in a different manner. He will describe the process by which one can realize the spiritual knowledge, and that is working without fruitive results. When you act with such knowledge in such a manner, then you will be freed from all reactions to pious and impious activities, because of which you are continually bound in this material world, birth after birth. When you engage in this activity of devotional service, there is no loss or diminution. Whatever you do is permanently preserved in your next life. You resume from that very point. You don't lose it permanently. And those who are in this path, they are resolute. They want to attain pure devotional service to Krishna. They want to attain pure love of Krishna. They want to serve Krishna in the spiritual world fully and absolutely and unconditionally. Anyone who is not on this path, his intelligence is multi-branched. He has multiple desires, and he has to fulfill his multiple desires and yet try to figure out how to go up or down in this material existence. Okay, 42 to 53. Here Krishna explains the difference between fruitive work and devotional service. By devotional service, one can attain divine consciousness. Fruitive work refers to activities which are taught in Vedic culture, karma, swadharma, but with the aim of securing material happiness. Whereas in devotional service, even though we engage in our swadharma, we are not really interested in the material happiness that comes along with it. We are primarily interested in spiritual progress. Look at this, 42 to 43, where Krishna begins a description of the Vedas. The four Vedas, Rig, Yajur, Sama, Atharva, primarily talk about how one can be elevated to the heavenly planets, how one can have a good life in sequence, one after another. So people who don't understand the actual purport, the intended meaning of the Vedas, they think that this is the teaching of the Vedic literature, and they think that there is nothing more than this. They think that is what is all this spiritual jumbo mumbo. It's all, you just need to worship various Vedic deities and you attain sense enjoyment, life after life, celestial enjoyment, human enjoyment, and so on. These people, they are so bewildered that the resolute determination to engage in devotional service to the Lord does not take place. It does not take place. Keep in mind that the Vedas, they primarily are dealing with an audience who are very, very materialistic. In order to attract them towards spiritual life, they are first being provided means by which they can be materially satisfied, so that the people will develop faith in the Vedas. But he's telling Arjuna, Krishna is telling Arjuna, oh Arjuna, you become transcendental to these three modes. You become transcendental to achievement of anything material. You should become fully spiritual. You're not losing anything by this. Keep in mind, just as a small well can yield a small amount of water and it can be used for specific purposes, but a great reservoir of water, like for instance a large lake, that can fulfill all the purposes that the small well can fulfill. Similarly, for the person who knows the purpose behind the Vedas and who is engaged in Vedic activities in such a manner that he can progress in Krishna consciousness, he can attain everything that the Veda is teaching. You have a right to engage in your material prescribed duties. But don't think that because you are engaged in your prescribed duties, you can enjoy the material benefits that accompany those prescribed duties. Because if you do that, then you become attached to it, which means you will have to take another body again, and you have to enjoy the material happiness, which is mixed with material unhappiness, by the way, in the material world. So in that way, you are caught up within this cycle of birth and death. But at the same time, don't think you can get away by giving up your material prescribed duties. That is not the solution. So therefore, Krishna says, never be attached to not doing your duty. Perform your duty equipoised in Krishna consciousness by engaging in devotional service and surrender unto the Lord. Because if you do that, you become free from good and bad reactions even in this life. So even though you are engaged in material activities in order to maintain your body while you are engaged in Krishna consciousness, even though those material activities are the same as what is presented in Vedic culture, it is categorically different from the materialistic people in Vedic culture who want to attain the heavenly planets, because you can attain freedom from the cycle of birth and death, and many people have already done this, and they have attained the state beyond all miseries by attaining Vaikuntha. When your intelligence has got out of delusion, then you will become indifferent to everything that you have heard in the Vedas and all that you haven't yet heard in the Vedic literature. The Vedic literature is vast. You have, in this lifetime, you have heard that if you do this, you attain this happiness. If you do that, you attain that happiness. If you do this, you attain this material pleasure. If you do that, you attain that material pleasure. Like this, there are so many other activities which are prescribed, which you haven't yet heard. But you will become indifferent to everything material. All material incentives presented in Vedic literature, you will attain indifference towards all of them. You will not be disturbed by the advertisements presented in the Vedic literature. You will become fixed in attaining self-realization and God realization. This is the state of divine consciousness. Then in 54, just one verse, Arjuna inquires about the symptoms of one who has attained divine consciousness. This is very important. The Bhagavad-gita is a scientific text. It presents objectively what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness has attained transcendence. How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? How does he walk? Arjuna is asking all these questions. And from 55 to 58, Lord Krishna describes the behavior of a person in such divine consciousness. Look at his description. When a person gives up all varieties of material desires, which are actually coming from his own head, he's just imagining that you can permanently be satisfied in the material world. So when he gives up all varieties of such desires and he finds satisfaction in the self alone, the self is an eternal servant of Krishna, and he is satisfied to be an eternal servant of Krishna. He is satisfied to engage in devotional service, samanya dharma, general common duties for all living entities, which is to serve Krishna. Then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. He is not affected by material miseries. He is not elated by material happiness. He is not disturbed by these things. His mind is steady. He does not praise persons who give him material good. He does not despise people who take away something from him. He is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Here is a good example. Just as a tortoise, it draws its limbs within the shell whenever it wants. Similarly, one who is in divine consciousness, he withdraws his senses from sense objects and uses them only to serve Krishna. Why is this happening? That is described here from 59 to 61. The higher taste of Krishna consciousness enables one to abandon sense gratification. Keep in mind that even though a tortoise may draw its limbs away, like that we may also withdraw our senses from sense enjoyment. Like when we get sick, we are just bedridden. We are not engaging in various forms of sense enjoyment. But still, the taste for the sense objects remains. But when you experience the higher taste of devotional service to Krishna, of pure spiritual life, then you are fixed in divine consciousness. You should always keep in mind the senses are very strong, and they forcibly carry away the mind of a person who is trying to control his senses. But one who restrains his senses by keeping them under Krishna, whose mind is fixed on Krishna, he is able to control them, and he is a man of divine consciousness. Then in 62, in the section from text 62 to 72, Lord Krishna explains that unless one fixes his consciousness on Krishna, he will fall victim to sense gratification. If a person is not in divine consciousness, if he is not even trying to fix his consciousness on Krishna, while he is contemplating on the objects of senses, he goes through the fall down sequence. He develops attachment for them, then he becomes lusty after them, then he becomes angry because one's lust cannot be satisfied to the fullest extent, then he becomes completely deluded, his memory becomes bewildered. Initially he thought that he would make spiritual progress, now he's totally bewildered, he's forgotten about spiritual life, he's simply absorbed in how to enjoy his senses, his intelligence is lost, and then he falls down again into material existence. But one who can control his senses and engage them in Krishna consciousness, he can attain the complete mercy of the Lord. That person will not experience material existence anymore. His intelligence is soon well established in the Supreme, in Krishna consciousness, without which there is no possibility of peace. This point, that one can become peaceful only in Krishna consciousness, Krishna very strongly brings it up in later chapters. Just as a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even if you let one of the senses engage in non-Krishna conscious activities, then his intelligence will be taken away, then he will fall down. Therefore, one whose senses, all of them are restrained from their objects and brought into into Krishna consciousness, away from sense gratification, that person, you should understand, is a person of divine consciousness. He is completely different from materialistic people. What is day for him is night for you. What is night for you is day for him. He is not disturbed by the various desires that the mind may generate due to previous association. He is fully satisfied in the activities of the soul, which is to engage in service to Krishna. He has given up all desires for sense gratification, and he is fully engaged in service to Krishna without any sense of material proprietorship. He becomes fully peaceful. And even if one comes to that status, at the hour of death, he can enter into the kingdom of God, which is the same as attaining pure love of Godhead.